November 15, 1944, a windowless concrete bunker outside Berlin. Colonel Wilhelm Kramer hunched over supply charts, the dim light catching the silver at his temples as his finger traced the impossibly long red lines stretching across the map of Europe. Allied supply routes from the Normandy beachheads to their rapidly advancing front lines. "Their food won't reach the front," he declared to the room of logistics officers, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of a man who had spent 20 years mastering the science of military supply chains. "The Americans have overextended themselves. Within 2 weeks, their offensive will grind to a halt." Little did he know that across the Atlantic, the Americans had not just built a military force, they had reinvented the very concept of logistics itself. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the story of how one man's certainty about the impossibility of supplying a modern army across an ocean would crumble in the face of American industrial might, and how that revelation would change everything he believed about the war. Colonel Kramer had earned his reputation as the Wehrmacht's premier logistics expert through years of meticulous planning. His silver hair and permanently furrowed brow gave him the appearance of a stern university professor rather than a military officer. His office walls were lined with commendations for his work during the Blitzkrieg, when German forces had moved with unprecedented speed across Europe. Now that same mind was focused on one critical question. How were the Americans managing to supply their rapidly advancing forces? "The numbers simply do not add up, Müller," Kramer said to his aide, Lieutenant Hans Müller, a young officer with a background in mathematics who had been assigned to the colonel's staff after being wounded on the Eastern Front. "Look at these projections. Each American division requires 700 tons of supplies daily. They have over 20 divisions actively engaged. That's 14,000 tons every day that must travel from their ports to the front." Müller studied the charts, his analytical mind working through the calculations. "And they're advancing at a rate of about 5 miles per day on multiple fronts, sir." "Exactly!" Kramer slammed his hand on the desk. "Their supply lines are now extending 300 miles from Cherbourg and other coastal depots. The math is clear. Their trucks can't possibly maintain that volume over such distances. The roads of France were never designed for such traffic, and the rail networks we destroyed during our retreat." He allowed himself a small smile. "The laws of logistics are as immutable as the laws of physics, Müller. Their advance will stall, and then we can counter." Across the English Channel, Major Rebecca Cohen of the U.S. Army Transportation Corps stood on the dock at Southampton, watching as cranes swung massive containers from ships onto waiting railcars. A clipboard in her hand tracked the movement of supplies with a precision that would have impressed even Colonel Kramer. "Latest figures show we're moving 45,000 tons through this port alone, daily," she told Captain James Wilson, who had just arrived from Washington to observe the operation. "That's enough to supply 64 divisions." Wilson let out a low whistle. "The Germans must be scratching their heads trying to figure out how we're doing it." Cohen smiled. "They're thinking in terms of their own capabilities. But back home, we've completely reorganized our entire industrial base. Ford isn't making cars anymore. They're making trucks. And not just a few. They rolled out their 100th military truck last month. The scale of the American logistics operation dwarfed anything previously seen in warfare." While Colonel Kramer was correct that each division required approximately 700 tons daily, what he failed to comprehend was the sheer magnitude of America's response to this challenge. The Red Ball Express alone, an around-the-clock convoy system implemented after D-Day, utilized 5 958 trucks and carried over 12,500 tons of supplies daily to the advancing Allied armies. Meanwhile, in the small French town of Reims, Sergeant Frank Delaney of the Red Ball Express pulled his GMC CCKW2 1-2-ton truck, affectionately known as a deuce and a half, to the side of the road for a brief rest. His African-American transportation company had been driving for 20 hours straight, part of the massive supply chain feeding the Allied advance. "How many more runs you think we got in us, Sarge?" asked Private Williams, Delaney's co-driver, as he stretched his aching back. "As many as it takes," Delaney replied, checking his watch. "We're supposed to deliver these K-rations to the 1st Infantry Division by 600. That gives us 3 hours. Germans probably think we've got magic trucks that don't need fuel, or drivers that don't need sleep," Williams said with a tired laugh. "Let them think whatever they want," Delaney responded, climbing back behind the wheel. "Long as we keep these supplies moving forward, the boys at the front keep moving forward too." By late November, Colonel Kramer's confidence began to waver. The anticipated American supply crisis hadn't materialized. Instead, Allied forces continued their advance, seemingly unhindered by the logistical challenges that should have crippled them. "These intercepts from the front can't be correct," Kramer muttered, reviewing intelligence reports. "They claim American soldiers are receiving not just adequate rations, but hot meals, coffee, cigarettes, even chocolate bars, at the front lines." Lieutenant Miller cleared his throat. "Sir, we have confirmation from multiple sources. Their supply situation appears to be robust." "Impossible!" Kramer spread the supply maps across his desk again. "Let's recalculate. We know they're using the Red Ball Express, their truck convoy system. But even with the most efficient operation, they should be experiencing critical shortages by now." What Kramer couldn't grasp was the fundamental difference in approach. While German logistics relied on careful calculation and rationing, the American system operated on principles of overwhelming abundance. Where German quartermasters counted each bullet, American supply officers sent forward more ammunition than could possibly be used. When German troops received their carefully measured rations, American GIs were opening crates containing not just food, but chewing gum, candy bars, and cigarettes. The revelation came in early December when Kramer received a report from a German officer who had been captured and then escaped from an American POW processing center. Major Heinrich Vollmer stood at attention in Kramer's office, his uniform still bearing the grime of his journey back through the lines. "You requested to see me specifically, Major. Why?" Kramer asked. "Because of your expertise in logistics, Colonel, what I witnessed in American hands. It contradicts everything we've been led to believe about their supply situation." Kramer leaned forward. "Explain." "They're not just well supplied, sir. They have excess, abundance. When I was captured, they offered me a cigarette, an American brand, Lucky Strike. The private who gave it to me had 3 full packs. Then they fed me from the same field kitchen that served their own men. Hot food, Colonel, meat, potatoes, even coffee with sugar." Kramer's expression remained skeptical. "One well-supplied unit doesn't represent their entire army." "It wasn't just one unit, sir." Vollmer's voice took on an urgent tone. "I was transported to a rear processing center. Along the way, I saw their supply columns. Not dozens of trucks, Colonel. Hundreds, and they weren't just carrying ammunition and fuel. They had entire trucks dedicated to mail from home, another carrying nothing but special rations for their winter offensive." "That's inefficient," Kramer said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Inefficient, yes, but effective." Vollmer paused. "And there's more. They're trucks, sir. They're all identical, standardized, parts interchangeable. When one broke down, I watched as they cannibalized parts from damaged vehicles they were towing back for repair. They had the truck running again in 20 minutes. The standardization of American equipment represented a revolution in military logistics that the German command had failed to appreciate fully. While German forces relied on a hodgepodge of vehicles, many of them requisitioned from conquered territories and requiring unique parts, the Americans had created fleets of identical trucks, jeeps, and other vehicles. The GMC CCKW alone was produced in numbers exceeding 500 during the war. As December progressed, the evidence continued to mount. Allied air supremacy meant that supply drops could supplement the ground transportation network. The American-built Mulberry harbors, artificial ports towed across the English Channel, allowed ships to unload directly onto the French coast, bypassing the bottleneck of damaged port facilities. For Colonel Kramer, the most disturbing reports came from German POWs returning in prisoner exchanges, who described the conditions in American supply depots. "The scale, Colonel, it's difficult to comprehend," reported one Wehrmacht captain who had been held near a major American supply base. "I saw stockpiles of ammunition that could supply our entire army for months, warehouses full of just chocolate bars and cigarettes. Their soldiers receive more calories in desserts than our men get in their entire daily ration." The psychological impact of this abundance on German soldiers was profound. Men who had been surviving on increasingly meager rations encountered American prisoners who complained about the quality of their 3 hot meals a day. Propaganda that had portrayed Americans as soft and unprepared collided with the reality of well-fed, well-equipped troops advancing steadily toward German borders. By mid-December, Kramer found himself summoned to a meeting with General Walter Buell, the Army Chief of Staff for the High Command. "Your latest assessment, Colonel?" the general asked without preamble. Kramer stood stiffly, aware that his reputation rested on his answer. "Sir, I must revise my previous projections. The American supply capability exceeds our intelligence estimates by approximately 300%. 300%? The general's voice was incredulous. "At minimum, sir, they've created a logistics system unlike anything we've encountered before. It's not just about quantity, though their production numbers are staggering. It's their approach. They've eliminated variability wherever possible, standardized everything from trucks to ration containers. Even their ammunition crates are designed to be repurposed as flooring for field hospitals or bunkers." The general's face darkened. "Can we disrupt this system?" "We're attempting to, sir. Operation Wacht am Rhein will target their supply lines through the Ardennes. If successful, it could create significant difficulties for their forces." Neither man spoke aloud what both were thinking: that the operation, later to be known as the Battle of the Bulge, represented a desperate gamble rather than a sound strategic move. As the German offensive in the Ardennes was being prepared, Major Rebecca Cohen found herself facing a different kind of challenge in Paris, where she'd been reassigned to coordinate supply distribution for the Allied forces preparing to counter the expected German attack. "We're looking at moving approximately 90,000 tons of supplies in the next week," she explained to her team of transportation officers. "Priority goes to ammunition, fuel, and winter clothing. The temperature's dropping, and intelligence suggests the Germans may try to exploit bad weather to neutralize our air advantage." Captain Wilson, who had remained attached to her unit as an observer, marveled at the scale of the operation. "If this works, it'll be the most complex logistical feat of the war so far." Cohen nodded. "The Germans are counting on our supply lines being vulnerable. They don't understand that we've built redundancy into every aspect of our system. If they cut one route, we activate another. If they destroy a depot, we have 3 more nearby." On December 16th, the German offensive began. Spearheaded by SS Panzer divisions, the attack initially made significant progress, creating a bulge in the Allied lines. For a brief moment, it seemed Colonel Kramer's predictions about Allied supply vulnerabilities might prove correct after all. In his headquarters, now moved closer to the front, Kramer received the initial reports with cautious optimism. "We've cut the main supply route between Liège and Bastogne," Lieutenant Müller reported. "American forces in Bastogne are effectively isolated." "And their response?" Kramer asked. Confused initially, but Müller hesitated. "Speak freely, Lieutenant." "They're adapting faster than anticipated, sir. They've already established alternative routes to the north and south, and their air force, when weather permits, is conducting supply drops to isolated units. The siege of Bastogne would become a powerful illustration of the contrast between German and American logistics. When surrounded, the American 101st Airborne Division was asked to surrender. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe famously replied with a single word: "Nuts." This defiance was made possible not just by the courage of the men, but by the confidence that supplies would reach them, either by air or through the relief forces they knew were coming. Meanwhile, German forces, despite their initial success, found themselves critically short of fuel. The panzer divisions that had broken through Allied lines began to stall, not from enemy action, but from empty fuel tanks. The mighty German war machine, for all its tactical brilliance, was being defeated by the most basic logistical failure. Across the battlefield, Sergeant Delaney and his transportation company had been reassigned to emergency fuel delivery for tanks and vehicles rushing to counter the German offensive. "Never seen anything like this, Sarge," Private Williams commented as they drove through the night, part of a massive convoy rushing fuel to the front. "We're moving faster than the combat units." "That's the whole point," Delaney replied. "We get there first. The tanks never have to stop rolling." The weather cleared on December 23rd, allowing Allied aircraft to attack German supply lines while delivering critical supplies to surrounded forces. The German advance, already slowing due to fuel shortages, began to collapse. In his headquarters, Colonel Kramer received the reports with a growing sense of despair. "Our fuel reserves are critically low. 5th and 6th Panzer Armies are reporting less than 24 hours of operational capacity remaining." General Buell's response was blunt. "And the Americans? Fuel convoys are reaching their forward units without significant interruption. They've established temporary airfields just behind their lines. The latest intelligence indicates they're delivering over 30,000 gallons of fuel per day to the battlefront alone." "How?" The general's question contained equal parts anger and genuine bewilderment. Kramer had been asking himself the same question for months. "Production capacity, sir. While we're extracting the last drops from our synthetic fuel plants, they're drawing from seemingly limitless oil fields. Their single pipeline system, Pluto, they call it, delivers more fuel to their armies than our entire transportation network combined. The pipeline under the ocean, Pluto, represented yet another American logistical innovation that had completely transformed the supply equation. By early 1945, it was delivering over 1 million gallons of fuel daily directly to Allied forces. As the German offensive collapsed, Colonel Kramer found himself tracking a different set of numbers: the rate of American counter-advance and the rapidly diminishing German capacity to resist it. The earlier certainty that had defined his career had been replaced by a grim recognition of the fundamental miscalculation the German High Command had made about American capabilities. On January 8, 1945, with the Battle of the Bulge effectively over and American forces resuming their advance toward Germany, Colonel Kramer was ordered to prepare contingency plans for supplying German forces as they retreated toward the Rhine. "It's no longer about winning, is it, sir?" Lieutenant Müller asked quietly as they worked through the night on the plans. Kramer was silent for a long moment. "No," he finally admitted. "It's about survival now. We failed to understand what we were truly facing, not just an army, but an entire nation transformed into a supply system." The numbers that had once seemed impossible to Kramer now painted a clear and devastating picture. American production for 1944 alone included 96 318 aircraft, 17 565 tanks, 224 272 artillery pieces, and 6 500 rifles. The U.S. Army Transportation Corps operated 7 railway cars, 6 ships, and over 120 trucks. Against such capacity, German forces, despite their tactical skill and fighting spirit, were mathematically incapable of victory. By February 1945, Allied forces had reached the Rhine, the last natural barrier before the German heartland. Colonel Kramer, now responsible for organizing the defense of crossing points, found himself in a briefing with several senior officers who had just arrived from Berlin. "The Führer demands we hold the Western Bank at all costs," one general announced. "He is confident that the enemy's supply lines have become too extended to maintain their offensive capability." Kramer exchanged a glance with Lieutenant Müller. After a moment of hesitation, he spoke. "With respect, that assessment contradicts all available evidence. American supply capabilities have increased, not decreased, as they've advanced. Their daily tonnage now exceeds 50,000 across all fronts." The room fell silent. Questioning the Führer's strategic assessment, even indirectly, had become increasingly dangerous. "Explain yourself, Colonel," the general said coldly. "The fundamental assumption of our strategic planning has been flawed from the beginning," Kramer said, his voice steady despite the risk he was taking. "We projected American capabilities based on our own limitations. Their industrial capacity isn't comparable to ours. It's operating in an entirely different category." He spread a series of charts across the table. "These are production figures obtained from our intelligence services. American factories produced 47 times more ammunition in 1944 than our entire production since 1939. Their trucks, just trucks, not tanks or aircraft, outnumber our entire mechanized force by a factor of 5. And while our soldiers receive 2,000 calories daily when supply lines are optimal, the average American soldier receives 4,500, including fresh meat and eggs delivered to frontline positions." The general studied the figures, his expression unreadable. "You're suggesting the war is lost because of American supply trucks?" "I'm stating that we fundamentally misunderstood the nature of modern warfare," Kramer replied. "We believed in the superiority of our tactical doctrine, our fighting spirit, our technology. But this war has revealed a harsh truth. Logistics determines the outcome of conflicts more surely than courage or tactical brilliance. The American system has not just matched ours, it has rendered it obsolete." In March 1945, as American forces prepared to cross the Rhine, Major Rebecca Cohen received a new assignment, planning for the post-war occupation of Germany. The logistics challenge was shifting from supporting combat operations to feeding the civilian population of a defeated nation. "Initial estimates suggest we'll need to provide basic necessities for up to 20 million German civilians," she explained to her planning staff. "Many are already near starvation in areas affected by the fighting." "Are we equipped for that scale of humanitarian operation?" Captain Wilson asked. "We're already transitioning production," Cohen replied. "The same system that delivered ammunition and fuel will deliver food and medicine. The railroads we're repairing, the roads we're clearing, they'll carry relief supplies as well as military equipment." What neither Cohen nor Wilson could fully appreciate was how this abundance would affect the German population psychologically. After years of increasing deprivation, the sight of American supply convoys rolling into devastated German towns, bringing not just food, but cigarettes, chocolate, and even chewing gum for children, would do more to reshape German perceptions of America than any propaganda campaign. On April 21, 1945, with American forces deep inside Germany and the collapse of organized resistance imminent, Colonel Kramer received unexpected visitors at his temporary headquarters in a partially damaged school building. Two American officers, a major and a captain, were escorted in by Lieutenant Muller. "Colonel Wilhelm Kramer?" the American major asked, consulting a clipboard. "I'm Major David Stern, U.S. Army Transportation Corps. This is Captain Robert Allen." Kramer rose from his desk. Surprised. "You're from logistics, not intelligence." Stern nodded. "We're conducting an assessment of German supply systems as part of our post-war planning. Your name came up repeatedly in captured documents as the Wehrmacht's leading logistics expert." For a moment, Kramer considered the irony. He had spent years trying to understand the American supply system. Now they had come to study his. "What do you hope to learn from our failure?" he asked bluntly. "Not failure, Colonel, adaptation," Stern replied. "German forces maintained operational capability despite material shortages that would have collapsed most armies. We're interested in how you managed that." The conversation that followed was surprisingly collegial, a professional exchange between logisticians who shared a common understanding of their field despite having served on opposing sides. Kramer explained the German system of precise allocation, careful husbanding of resources, and prioritization of essential supplies. "Fascinating," Captain Allen commented. "You achieved remarkable efficiency within your constraints." "But efficiency alone wasn't enough," Kramer said quietly. "Your system valued abundance over efficiency. You could afford waste. We could not." Major Stern nodded thoughtfully. "There's a lesson there for both sides, I think." As the meeting concluded, Stern handed Kramer a package. Cigarettes, coffee, chocolate. Small comforts, but I thought you might appreciate them. Kramer accepted the package with a mixture of gratitude and lingering professional curiosity. These items, considered non-essential luxury goods in our system, how far behind the front would a German officer of equivalent rank need to be to receive such things? Behind the front? Stern looked confused. "These aren't special allocations, Colonel. Every American soldier receives these in their standard ration." After the Americans departed, Kramer sat alone in his office, turning a chocolate bar over in his hands. The simple gift represented everything he had failed to understand about the American way of war. It wasn't just about moving sufficient supplies to maintain combat effectiveness. The American system delivered abundance, creating not just material superiority, but psychological dominance. A week later, as news of Hitler's suicide reached him, Kramer made his final entry in the logistics journal he had maintained throughout the war. "The fundamental miscalculation of our strategic planning was not military, but industrial. We prepared to fight an army. Instead, we faced the full productive capacity of the world's greatest industrial power, transformed entirely to the purpose of war. The American supply chain was not merely a support system for their military, it was their primary weapon, against which tactical genius, technological innovation, and human courage proved insufficient. Future military planners who failed to understand this transformation do so at their peril." In August 1945, Sergeant Frank Delaney stood on the deck of a transport ship heading back to America. His transportation company had remained in Europe months after VE Day, shifting from moving ammunition to delivering relief supplies. "Hard to believe it's over," Private Williams said, watching the coastline of France recede in the distance. "The fighting's over," Delaney corrected him, "but those supply lines we built, they're still running, still delivering food to people who were shooting at us a few months ago." "You think they appreciate it, the Germans?" Delaney considered the question. "Maybe not all of them, but I saw their faces when our trucks rolled into those towns. They weren't seeing just food and medicine. They were seeing a different way of doing things, A system that produces so much it can afford to be generous, even to its enemies. That's going to change how they think about us, isn't it? That's the thing about supply lines, Delaney said with a smile. They don't just move goods. They connect people. And right now, those connections might be doing more to win the peace than any treaty or occupation force. Colonel Wilhelm Kramer survived the war and was briefly held as a prisoner before being released in late 1945. His expertise in logistics led to his recruitment by several German manufacturing companies during the post-war reconstruction period. He would later serve as a consultant to NATO, helping to design supply systems that incorporated lessons from both German efficiency and American abundance. Lieutenant Müller returned to the university after the war, eventually becoming a professor of industrial engineering. His lectures on the logistical lessons of World War II influenced a generation of German business leaders during the economic miracle of the 1950s and 60s. Major Rebecca Cohen continued her military career, playing a significant role in the Berlin airlift of 1948-49, another logistical operation that demonstrated American supply capabilities could achieve what seemed mathematically impossible. The airlift delivered over 2-3 million tons of supplies to the blockaded city, with planes landing every 3 minutes at the height of the operation. The Red Ball Express was officially disbanded in November 1944, but its legacy lived on. Many of its African-American drivers, including Frank Delaney, returned home with technical skills and experiences that would contribute to both the civil rights movement and America's post-war economic expansion. The American supply system that had seemed so impossible to Colonel Kramer would transform not just military logistics, but the entire global economy in the decades following the war. The standardization, mass production, and distribution networks developed for wartime needs became the foundation for the consumer economy that would define the latter half of the 20th century. The simple certainty expressed in that Berlin bunker in November 1944, "Their food won't reach the front," had been more than a tactical miscalculation. It represented a failure to comprehend a fundamental transformation in the nature of industrial society itself. The endless stream of American supply trucks that rolled across Europe did more than deliver food, ammunition, and fuel to the front lines. They delivered the future, and that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.